Olya, the gaming industry is evolving so rapidly, so many new gaming development environments, so many new platforms out there to build games on. And Sanlo has entered the market to really help game developers realize their visions faster and more efficiently. What was your inspiration for creating the Sanlo platform?
Both my co-founder and I worked in gaming more than 10 years ago, and then spent quite a few years working in the industry. And a lot of our friends really from that time started their own gaming companies. So ultimately it was, how do we build something that's valuable for people who want to build, who want to create? That's where the strengths and passions are. And we can create something that's on the background to help them, rather than getting distracted by financial operations, logistics, people operations, etc.
So one of the first products that you've rolled out is a solution to help game developers, app developers get non-dilutive capital that you're providing. How does that part of the solution work?
We actually started off with very different product. We started with financial planning and forecasting, and that was our focus. So our thesis was very much around optimizing workflows around data aggregation and applying that data for planning in a more efficient and automated way.
And this was data collecting on how users were interacting with the game, coming on board the game, downloading the game,
Yep.
retention times on the game,
Yes.
all of this sort of data.
Yeah, so it's two sources. Largely, I would put them into two categories. One is the product data, and then the other bucket is the financials. Right, so the actual typical stuff that every company has to deal with. So that was late 2020. We entered in 2021. We started working with more customers, and actually the signal that we were getting was more about deployment of additional capital that those developers needed to scale. Specifically, finding resources, finding financial resources for user acquisition, for marketing. So that's where, being a startup of 5 months into our existence, we decided, okay, we're actually going to repurpose the data and the algorithms that we had been developing for the forecasting piece, and funnel that into the capital. So that's how it turned into financing becoming the first product. Last thing I'll say on the non-dilutive side, that's very important. I think it's a little bit different from non-dilutive when we talk about SaaS businesses or e-commerce. Non-dilutive, there are two parts to it. There is the equity ownership, right? And I think this is where mostly people think about when they talk about non-dilutive, that you keep your stake, you don't give it up for funding. The other part that is super important for the industry that we're in is creative ownership, right? So there are alternatives that developers have and have had for a long time, which is publishing. And with publishing, a larger company effectively gives you funds, and they provide support throughout the development and throughout the growth of the company. But there could be some creative ownership dilution, if you will. That was an important factor for us to also say, okay, we can build something that has no dilution on both of those aspects.
Right. So the monetization strategies that you're helping game developers, app developers realize, in-game revenues, optimizing user acquisition, and on the financial side overall of helping them drive performance. What are the first sort of biggest use cases that you're seeing game developers take advantage of with the Sanlo platform?
The use cases where the capital comes handy in today's world is, one is still the user acquisition, right? So for the developers that have still figured out the right equation on your cost per install versus the revenue that you're going to get from a player, those are the ones that take where the capital is very advantageous, right? Because you can think of it as you deploy capital to something where it has more or less sure return. So it's much better than any other alternative. Second use case is more about more so building your portfolio of titles. Studios get to the point where they don't have just one title. They end up building more and more and experimenting. So this is another use case where it's they have proven something on a title or two, and then there's more or less predictable ROI around releasing more titles. And the third one is, which is very relevant in today's world, is just general working capital and cash flow management. And that's where it gets us to the nuances around dynamics of where game developers distribute their products, how they monetize, and the cash flow, when they get paid versus when they have to spend.
One of the things that you talk about as a future in the Sanlo platform as well is the role that the next evolution of artificial intelligence is going to play in the creation of game titles and helping game developers. Generative artificial intelligence is the current wave. Where do you see it fitting in the Sanlo platform?
With generative AI, I think it has a lot of potential to help on the efficiency front. And it's also, when it comes to us, I think it's being able to, if we were to focus on generative AI specifically, I think this is where we can become more of that advisory platform, if you will, around hiring. Do you need to hire people for that function? Or you'd rather hire people in that function because this function can now be taken care of.
You're thinking there's going to be a proliferation of game developers because artificial intelligence is going to enable the game development process to become much more cost effective and enable fewer people to do more.
Yep.
What do you think is the other side of that in terms of the challenges it's going to create?
Distribution is already a challenge. So what I was saying earlier around user acquisition have becoming more expensive. When you think about it, considering how large a gamer population is around the world, there are surprisingly few platforms where you can play games, right? Like, to put it in perspective. So therefore, it's harder and harder to get discovered. Harder to get discovered, therefore it's more expensive to acquire your players and retain them. Long story short, I think distribution is going to be the biggest challenge, just because of the sheer amount of content that's going to be there. And that also puts a lot of pressure on the quality of games. I think there will be a lot of, to use the word dilution again, dilution of quality. I think we'll see a lot of titles that's even longer tail than today that don't necessarily provide the depth of player experience that ultimately players themselves expect.